and we are going to be live. There we are. We are live. So Debbie, just give me a moment here, and we'll bring this up and introduce everybody to Debbie Greenberg. Okay?
Okay.
Fabulous. Right after the break here. It's 9 a.m. in Los Angeles. It's I don't know why, but it is. It's 9 a.m. in Los Angeles. It's 5 p.m. in Liverpool. You heard me right, folks. It's 5 p.m. in Liverpool. And in New York City, well, it's just about high noon. Hello, everybody. Mad Dog DeCipio joining me today on this episode, special episode, in fact, of What's the Buzz Popcast, America's podcast, is Debbie Greenberg. Debbie is a really interesting lady. She owned, ready for this one? She owned the Cavern Club. Yes, that Cavern Club. But alas, no, she didn't own it while the Beatles were there. But very shortly thereafter, Debbie Greenberg is a very fascinating woman who chronicled her life story in this amazing book, Cavern Club, The Inside Story. And so, Debbie, welcome to the show. I am the Mad Dog. We all know that. But you just know me as Angelo.
Thank you, Angelo.
How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you. Hope you are too.
Wonderful. It's a fabulous day to finally, and I have to tell people, Debbie and I were supposed to meet in I believe in New York about 2 weeks ago. And because of one circumstance and another, we couldn't get together. Well, Debbie's back in Liverpool now, and finally, through the magic of technology, we're able to sit down and have a conversation about this amazing place that she was fortunate enough to have a hand in, called the Cavern. And you wrote this book out of, first of all, people asked you to write a book. I know that. Everyone wanted you to write a book. The other thing is you chronicled not only your life in this book, but you were able to capsulize and summarize the feeling and the energy of that time. We're talking about the early to mid 60s, from about 1965, 66 to about, I'm going to say about 1971, around there, right? About right?
Yes, well, I started to go to the Cavern in 1959, so the book covers from then till 1970.
Yeah. Yeah, well, there was life before the Beatles, folks, believe it or not. My understanding, Debbie, is that the Cavern began as kind of a blues jazz club.
Yes.
Is that right? What was the scene like at the time?
It was good. It was popular. The guy that opened the Cavern, Alan Sittner, in 1957, he was a jazz enthusiast.
Right.
And he'd been over to Paris, and he'd seen a cellar jazz club over there on the left bank called Le Caveau. And when he got back to Liverpool, he wanted to replicate it. And he found the ideal premises in Matthew Street, cellars with arches underneath a towering block of warehouses, which was perfect for him. And that's how he opened the Cavern.
Yeah.
He brought big jazz group bands, as they were then. He had the Mississippi Jazz Band played to open the club, but he had jazz bands like Acker Bilk, Chris Barber, Kenny Ball. He had all the big names coming to the Cavern.
I was going to ask you about that. How did Southern American music translate in Liverpool at the time? We're talking about the latter part of the 1950s, early 1960s. Were people at the time very receptive to Southern jazz and blues?
Yes, they were. It filtered through from the US to us in Liverpool. Predominantly due to the sailors that went to America, and they brought the records back. And anything that was music was wonderful. It was 10 years after the war, almost, maybe a little bit longer, and we were hungry for good music.
What kind of reaction? I always love to ask people this. What kind of reaction did you witness when people like Chuck Berry and Little Richard, Elvis Presley, popped on the music scene back then? Because we thought they were wild here. I can imagine what people overseas thought.
Oh, they were brilliant. They were dynamite. We couldn't get enough of them. They were new, and they were, as you say, they were wild and they were loud, and we wanted more.
My understanding too is that Jerry Lee Lewis, who we just passed away, Jerry Lee Lewis was very popular in England at the time, particularly in Liverpool. There were a group of guys. I'm going to talk to you about this because I have a friend I have several friends in the UK, but he said, ask Debbie to explain to you what a teddy boy is. So, okay. So what the hell is a teddy boy?
A teddy boy teddy boys were a group of boys who wanted to look hard, and they were hard. They used to wear knuckle dusters and
God.
And they'd have razor knives and everything, and they'd have the slick hairstyle, combed back, short back and sides with the DA at the back.
Yeah.
And they'd have a long coat on, 3/4 length coat with drain clip trousers and neon colored socks. And they were threatening.
That's crazy. That was kind of it's funny. They called them teddy boys, but we didn't have a name for them here. We just called them hoodlums.
Yes.
Guys with the leather jacket, the slick back hair. Everybody wanted to look like Elvis,
That's right.
It was remarkable. You've written this book that encapsulated a time in history that was, well, first of all, it'll never be repeated. And that time in history was special for many reasons. There are challenges in writing a book, whether it's a smaller book like this or even a larger novel. You always run into challenges and difficulties in writing a book. What were the memorable challenges or difficulties for you in penning this incredible, fascinating book?
Well, Angelo, I didn't have many challenges because it was a labor of love for me. So, to be honest, the only challenge that I had were the difficult parts where the cavern was demolished, and that was very traumatic for us. So that was possibly the only time it felt like a challenge.
That's interesting. People, you just kind of segued right into what we're going to do later. People are watching this and they're listening. We're actually going to see photos tonight of the demolished Cavern Club. It's a sad thing, but from the ashes, like the phoenix, it rose to become the cavern once again.
Yes.
And so we're going to take I'm sure there's difficulties there for people who remember the glory days, but your father was one of those people who kind of breathed new life into this place. Let me tell everybody what's going on here. Back around 1965 or so, 66, your father, Alfred Gagan, came to you and said, Deborah, my daughter, my dear, my darling, how would you like to buy the cavern? At which point you said, are you nuts? But your dad said to you, listen, I have a chance to buy the Cavern Club. What do you think? You know?
Exactly. What do I think? It's like offering the child the key to the sweet shop. But
Yeah, for real.
but having said that, I had a good business head, and I said, "Look, Dad, I've seen the Cavern Peak, and I know it can happen again, and I think you should take it." And on my say so, he bought the Cavern together with a friend of his who had approached him in the beginning about buying the Cavern, a guy called Joe Davey. Joe owned a cafe in Duke Street where all the groups used to go for a meal after their gigs. It was open till 4 a.m. in the morning. And Joe said to my dad, I've got the chance of buying the Cavern, Alf, but I can't afford it on my own. Would you come in with me? And also, Joe was illiterate. He only signed his checks with a cross. So he needed Dad for the administration and that business acumen side as well. And that's when he came to me, my dad, and said, I've got the chance of buying the Cavern. What do you think? And so,
Yeah, it was, as people can see up on the screen right now, in 1966, the previous owner of the Cavern, I guess for one reason or another, bad management, bad money management, they declared bankruptcy.
Yes.
And your father, as you say in the book, kind of out of the blue, just said, what do you think would be a good idea to buy the Cavern? Take it over. And, it's like, as you said, it's like, giving a child the keys to the candy store. Absolutely. And who's going to refuse that? Let's be honest about it.
Not quite.
It's like the Godfather going up to Sonny Corleone, and making an offer you can't refuse. Of course you're going to take it. Of course. Crazy. I want to talk to you, though, about, because we talked about Liverpool at the time, it was kind of a seaport town.
Yes.
And I'm sure it's a very industrious city nowadays.
It is.
One of the things that happened back at that time were the youth of that area, young people in that area, were really protesting, vehemently protesting, to the point where I read that about 100 or so kids locked themselves in the cavern. They locked themselves in.
They did.
Can you tell me what happened there?
Yes, it was the 28th of February, 1966. And Ray McFall, the guy who owned it at the time, he called down to the Cavern that night and he said that the Cavern is closing tomorrow and the bailiffs are coming in the morning. And as soon as he left, the kids went crackers. I wasn't there that night.
Yeah.
But they barricaded the entrance to the Cavern with all the chairs from the centre aisle. But of course, the following day, the police came with the bailiffs, and they had to succumb, and they entered the building. But they went on a march through Liverpool, and they were singing to the Yardbirds song "Still I'm Sad." And they took a march through Liverpool, and then they did a sit-in Matthew Street, and they hung a big wreath over the door of the Cavern, because they all felt, everybody thought that was the demise of the Cavern then, And then a few weeks later, my dad came to me and said, "I've got the chance of buying the Cavern. What do you think?"
Yeah, that's you should. Is that a trick question, Pop?
Yes.
Trick question. So again, Alfred Gagan is Debbie's father. He is the guy who, I believe, he's the unsung hero here. Yes. And I want to tell people why. Your father was a very humble, quiet man most of the time.
Yes.
But very good at business.
Yes.
He knew how to make money.
That's right.
Which actually benefited, everyone. We all benefited from your father's keen sense of businessmanship. One of the things at the time is that as a young woman, probably early 20s, I'm guessing at this point, maybe 21, 22 you are?
I was 20.
Okay, so 20. But now you're growing up and you're seeing what's around you. You're taking mental notes, and you're you're surmising the situation. How much of that memory played into writing the book, and were you worried that you might remember things wrong? Because sometimes, the more time goes by, we remember things differently sometimes than they actually were. What kind of, how do I want to say this? Did your memory play tricks on you like it does to a lot of people?
No, no,
Well,
it
bless
didn't.
you. You're very lucky. You're very fortunate. So, but at the time, you're taking all these mental notes. Um, did you know at the time that this would make a great book? That your life story would turn out to be like this fairy tale story?
No, because I only decided to write the book in 2014, because
Oh, wow.
rumors were flying around Liverpool that the blame for the demolition of the cavern, the original cavern, was being laid at my father's feet, and he'd passed on, and he wasn't here to defend himself, and I knew that wasn't true, and I was
Yeah.
determined to put the record straight, and that's why I wrote the book.
Well, I can tell you, having read quite a bit of the in-depth history, you can blame a lot of people for the demise and demolition of the cavern, but Al Gagan ain't one of them. I
Correct.
could tell you that, for sure. There's a long list of names. If we want, you can go down that rabbit hole if you want, but it's a very deep rabbit hole to climb into. Um, Talk to me about this fascinating, handsome young man you met at the time, named Nigel Greenberg. Talk to
Well,
me about Nigel and his involvement in either the Cavern or Beatles lore, because he's got a
well,
fascinating history.
Nigel and I didn't meet until 1981.
Really?
We met on a blind date organized
Wow.
by mutual friends, and it was only then that I found out that he knew both of my parents. And
Isn't that remarkable?
he'd also owned the recording studio at the Cavern between 1964 and 66. But
That's where I was getting at.
and
That's
as Nigel moved out in February 66, we moved in April 66. So we were like ships that passed in the night.
you just, and that's, isn't that funny how serendipity, how life circumstances drew you back again?
Yes,
It's interesting you say that, Deb, because I just had a gentleman on the show who met Paul McCartney here in the States, in Tennessee.
right.
You're familiar with the song Junior's Farm?
Yes.
Okay. This gentleman I had, his name is Dan Ely. He gave Paul McCartney a Rickenbacker bass guitar that Paul generously gave back, but Denny Lane wanted to keep it. Now, I knew Denny from back in the day, but this gentleman knows Denny very well. And it's funny that this guitar had the similar history that you and Nigel had. It went from one place to another around the world, and it finally came back to my friend Dan
Amazing.
41 years later.
Wow.
Remarkable. Remarkable.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about the birth of the Beatles at the Cavern. A lot of people don't know this, but yes, there was life before the Beatles, but I will dare to say that when John, Paul, George, and Pete, yes, there was no Ringo yet,
Right.
John, Paul, George, and Pete Best, when they took the stage at the Cavern Club, I think all bets were off after that. No one in Liverpool or around the world had quite heard anything like that. It was a very unique sound, very distinctive. It was a little bit of Southern American doo-wop with the edginess of that Liverpool teddy boy kind of feel to it. See that? I had to use that teddy boy. I'm going to get that teddy boy in there too. We're also going to talk about something later on. I mean, you're going to explain this to me. Skiffle. What the hell's a skiffle? We're going to talk about skiffle in a minute, but I want to talk about the Beatles. You were there from the very beginning. You watched the Beatles
I did.
before Ringo.
Yes. The debut performance of the Beatles at the Cavern was on the 9th of February 1961. But they'd played at a venue outside Liverpool on the 27th of December 1960. And by all accounts, they'd given an incendiary performance and they were the talk of the town, and we couldn't wait to see them at the Cavern. But they'd been billed as the Beatles direct from Hamburg, Germany. So when we were waiting for them to arrive on the 9th of February, we were expecting to see a German band, or group as we called them then.
I've heard that. Everybody thought they were German because
That's
they
right.
played in Hamburg for so long.
But of course, when they arrived at the Cavern, they were Scousers, they were Liverpudlians, which was wonderful. That we were thrilled with that. But they just bounced onto the stage. They were exciting. They were intoxicating. Their energy was palpable. They were loud. They were raw. And instantly we were blown away with them. Well, I was. I went home to my dad that night and said, there's a group on the Cavern called the Beatles, and you mark my words, they're going to be famous one day. You just knew it, that they, as you say, they were unique. Absolutely.
Let's talk about that, Debbie, because that's a fascinating subject. The finished product was the Beatles, but prior to the Beatles, a young man named John Lennon formed a group called the Quarrymen.
Yes.
And then there was another group. It was the same group, and he gave it a different name called the Silver Beatles.
Yes.
Did you have a chance to see the Quarrymen evolve into the Beatles?
No, because the Quarrymen got together in 1957. That's when John met Paul at St. Peter's Church in Woolton. But Paul didn't join the group until the October of 57. And they did play at the Cavern during 1957 and 1958. But that was just before I went to the Cavern in 1959.
Right. So 1959 kind of ushered in this new era of music, particularly around Liverpool. For those of the people that are watching and listening, if you don't know what the Mersey Beat sound is, it is a uniquely Liverpudlian. Am I saying that right, or is it Liverpudlian?
Liverpudlian.
There you go. What she said. It's a uniquely Liverpudlian. It's a unique sound to Liverpool. There you go.
That covers it.
Boy, that'll twist your tongue. So it's a unique sound of people like, of course, the Beatles, Tony Sheridan's in the Beatles. People, they forget Tony Sheridan was a big part of the Beatles.
Oh, yes.
I have some of the early recordings too. Yeah, Tony was a big part. And then, of course, you had Peter and Gordon, Chad, Chad and Jeremy. You had Jerry and the Pacemakers. Oh, Lord. Let's see who else we had. Billy J. Kramer. The Searchers, Cilla Black. I love Cilla. She was amazing. The Foremost, the Swinging Blue Jeans.
Yeah.
Tony Crane and the Mersey Beats, the Shadows.
Yes.
I'm going to throw some names at you. There you go. Tony Crane and the Mersey Beats. I'll bet you didn't think I knew that one. I'm impressing. See, I'm just impressing Debbie like crazy today. You don't even know. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about some of these early Beatle influenced groups. And the Beatles, even as they developed their own style, were influencing other bands, which we never seen before. Talk about that a little bit, Debbie.
Well, they did. They influenced everybody. Everybody wanted to be like the Beatles, but of course they couldn't get that they were completely unique. But bands like you've just mentioned, Jerry and the Pacemakers, and another band at the Cavern called the Big Three, they're into this heavy rock style, the raw, loud music. It was fantastic. We couldn't get enough of it. And
Yeah.
people like the Foremost and the Searchers and Billy J. And the Remo Four and the Swinging Blue Jeans. We were so fortunate to have
Mhm.
all these fabulous groups around us.
Let me throw a couple of other names that people might be very, very surprised to find out actually played the Cavern Club. How about if I tell people the Rolling Stones?
They did, but
How about that?
not when we had it. The Rolling Stones played on the 5th of November 1963 at the Cavern.
Isn't that remarkable that the Rolling Stones followed the Beatles into the Cavern?
Yes.
And how about Donovan played the
Yes,
Cavern Club?
he did.
Yeah, Gilbert O'Sullivan
That's right.
also played the Cavern Club way back when. By the way, we're going to see a photo tonight of you and Nigel with Gilbert from the book. Yeah, the Swinging Blue Jeans, as I understand it. First of all, I love the name. I love the name, the Swinging Blue Jeans. As I understand it, they were like a house favorite there. They were
They
one
were.
of the house favorites at the Cavern Club.
Yes, absolutely. They
What was
used
it
to.
unique about their style? If you were to describe the Swinging Blue Jeans, how would you describe their musical style?
Well, it was rock, but it wasn't as heavy and raw as the Beatles. But it certainly got you going. You couldn't help but dance to them. They were a fabulous group, and they used to hold guest nights at the Cavern, the Swinging Blue Jeans.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
And the Beatles were on one of their guest nights.
So here's the question. It's funny that we know that the Beatles were unique. They were very different, but nobody can really define that niche. Everybody's got their own, you know, opinion of what it is that's special about them. You saw them from day one. So I'm going to ask you because I will consider Debbie Greenberg the resident expert. So here's how it's going to work. What was it about the Beatles, in your opinion? Which, and by the way, your opinion means everything here. What is it about the Beatles, in your opinion, that uniquely cemented them as the great? And even today, in 2023, they are still regarded the greatest rock and roll band ever.
That they were powerful. They were magnetic. They got you under their spell almost as soon as they played, and it's so difficult to put across how we felt. We felt as if they'd taken hold of us and they'd drawn us into their group. That's how
Yeah.
physical it felt. And it was like a feel good drug that we wanted more and more of every time they played. They were so
It's
special.
remarkable. My information tells me, and I had to double check this number, but my information tells me that you saw the Beatles in excess of 300 times. That's crazy.
Well, I saw them 292 times when they played the Cavern Club.
Oh my
Um,
God. That
but I
just at
al
the Cavern?
just at the Cavern, but I saw them at the
True.
the Tower Ballroom as well, and they played there 27 times.
Oh my Lord. Yeah, they're right. Over 300 times. Holy crap. And every time it must have been like a unique experience.
It was. It
Yeah,
was.
and I'm fascinated by that, Debbie. I'm fascinated by this group, and you only have so many songs you can play, but to see them 300 plus times and never get tired, that's like you don't see that anymore.
No.
If I listen to a performer for 5 minutes now and I don't like it, I'm bored. I'll never watch it, listen to them again. You know, if you haven't captured my attention in the first 5 minutes, you're done. That's why I'm still a big fan of the Beatles, Elvis Presley, Little
Yes.
Richard, Chuck Berry. I love that stuff from that time period. You know,
Well, the Beatles appeared with Little Richard. I saw them together at the Tower Ballroom in New Brighton, and that was on the 12th of October, 62. That was a fantastic show, but a completely different atmosphere to the Cavern. It was a big amphitheater, and
yeah.
the atmosphere was cold in comparison to the Cavern.
Interesting. How did that's really curious. How did Little Richard translate to that kind of audience? Was he the energetic Little Richard you would have expected? Was
Oh,
he?
yes. Yes, absolutely. I mean, it was massive, the Tower Ballroom. It was a big amphitheater. There was no seats. Everybody
Oh,
stood.
you had to
You
stand
had
up.
to stand, and there
Oh,
was a
wow.
gallery. There was a balcony that went right the way around the circular hall, and you could watch from there as well. Oh, he was amazing. He was just as we know him.
Yeah, that's remarkable. The other remarkable thing about the Beatles, a couple of things that were remarkable. They were one of the very few bands at the time that all dressed alike. They all had the same suits, and they all had a very distinctive, unique haircut. And people around the world were getting their hair cut like this, straight across, like the Beatles.
Right.
We all called it here in the States, we called it the Mo cut. You know who I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Mo from the Three Stooges. Talk to me about that. The first time you saw that unique appearance, um, did you think to yourself, "What the hell are my boys doing here?"
Well, John had been over to Paris with Paul. It was supposed to be going to Spain for his birthday, and they stopped off in Paris, bumped into a friend they knew from Hamburg, and he was he'd had his hair cut similar to Stu in Germany, and John and Paul wanted their hair cut the same way, but he had it cut like sort of a side fringe going across like this. And of course, because John and Paul couldn't manage this side thing going across, they kept doing this to straighten it. And that's where they got the head shake from. So when they came back to the Cavern, there was only John and Paul that had those two haircuts. And then about a week or so later, George joined in and he had his cut the same. But Pete wouldn't conform. He wanted to stay with the short back and sides at the back on the drums. So and that's how
Yeah.
the hairstyle was born.
More, I actually want to talk about Pete Best and Stuart Sutcliffe. Sadly, we just had the anniversary of a sad anniversary of Stuart Sutcliffe's passing at
Yes.
the very young age of just 21 years of age. He passed in, I believe, he passed in Hamburg, right?
Yes.
And I believe he passed from a brain hemorrhage.
You did.
Was it known at the time, Debbie, that that Stuart was a sick young man, that he had physical problems?
No, we didn't know about it because when the Beatles came to the Cavern for their debut, Stu wasn't with them. He'd stayed behind in Hamburg to be with Astrid. That was in 1961, the February.
Hmm.
But he did join the Beatles on the 21st of February and stayed with them in Liverpool until March. The last performance at the Lunchtime Cavern was the 24th of March. And a couple
Yeah,
of days later, they returned to Hamburg. And then, of course, the following year, when they went to Hamburg in the May, they'd gone just before May. They'd gone in the April, and of course, Astrid met them, to tell them the news. But because they'd signed a 7-week contract with the Star Club, they couldn't come back to Liverpool for Stu's funeral. So they
yeah,
had to stay where they were. But we had no knowledge of what was happening in Liverpool.
yeah. It's interesting. The other character we're talking about here, the late Stu Sutcliffe. We're also talking about Pete Best, the first or one of the first drummers. That, believe it or not, people don't know. The Beatles actually had five drummers. Five drummers for the Beatles. Yes, we all remember Ringo. He's, of course, the one who lasted.
Yes,
He's the one who made the most money,
that's true.
and he's still spending that money. But Pete Best, it is said that Pete Best, as you said, would not conform his haircut. That was one thing. The other reason given, and I want your opinion on this. It is said that Pete was asked to leave the band because he was getting more fan mail than Paul and John.
Well, these were the rumors that were flying around Liverpool. There were a few of them. That was one of them, and another one was that Paul was jealous because Pete was better looking and he was getting, as you say, more fan mail. And some of the other rumors were that they didn't think his drumming was good enough. But he'd been with the group 2 years by this time. It was August the 16th. 1962, when Pete was summoned to Brian Epstein's office, and he said to him, "The boys want you out, and Ringo's joining them on Saturday." That was a bolt out of the blue for Pete. He was absolutely devastated. But we never got to the bottom of why Pete was removed. Of course,
I would love the opportunity. I'll tell you what, I would love the opportunity to have Pete Best on the show and talk to him directly about that as well. I know that you know Pete.
Yes.
And you know him well. Why don't you? Well, maybe after when we get off the air, I'll give you some information. But I would love to have Pete Best on the show to talk to him about that, and have you back with him as well.
Okay.
That would be a fantastic show. You mentioned Ringo. Before Ringo Starr was Ringo Starr of the Beatles, star drummer of the Beatles, he was with Rory Storm and the Hurricanes.
That's right.
Not too shabby, by the way, because Rory Storm was quite the character himself. And Rory Storm and the Hurricanes were, yes, and you knew him as well, I'm sure.
Yes.
There's not many people Debbie didn't know, folks. Let me tell you, she got around. She knew the music scene in the day. She knew who was good and who stunk. And Rory Storm and the Hurricanes, they were a hot band.
They were.
They were a hot band. Rory Storm was, as we said, he was quite the character, very flamboyant, over the top.
Right. He was a showman.
Yes, he absolutely was. Why did it? I want to rephrase that. What was it about that performer, that time in history, that Rory Storm didn't become a bigger star than he was?
Do you know,
he was quite the big deal, right, Debbie, in Liverpool?
Oh, he was. He was a lovely guy, Rory. I don't know. He should have been a lot bigger than he was.
They called him the Elvis Presley of Liverpool. Rory Storm and the Hurricanes. And his drummer was a young guy named Richard Starkey, who became known as Ringo Starr.
Yeah.
How did Ringo garner the position of drummer? Who was it that noticed him first as a drummer? Was it Paul or Brian or John? Or how did... I'm not real sure, to be honest. And I love Beatles and I love the Beatles history. But nobody, I've heard three different versions. I've heard, Paul's version. I've heard the official version. And then I've heard Ringo's version. And all three versions don't jive together. They don't coalesce.
Okay.
So what was again, you're the expert here. If you say it, I believe it. So how did Ringo join the Beatles?
Well, I think because he'd stepped in Hamburg to back them or to drum for the Beatles when Pete wasn't well, and he was back in Liverpool. And so they knew Ringo. Obviously, they knew him from Rory Storm and the Hurricanes, but they knew how good a drummer he was because he drummed with them in Hamburg. And the story that I have heard is that it was George that was the one that was keen on having Ringo as a drummer.
Really? Oh, and I heard that one. Because Ringo gives the story that George is the one who recruited him.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I heard. It was
Yes.
George Harrison. Evidently, George wasn't as quiet as people think he was.
Oh, no, he wasn't.
No, not. And you knew George?
Well, not personally, we knew them very well because the proximity of the stage to the first row of seats in the Cavern was less than a foot or so away. So
Oh my
you could,
God.
and the stage was only a couple of feet high. So you could practically touch them. Whoever was on stage, it was such a close proximity. And it was a
Yeah.
very familiar and comfortable and safe place to be. And you could ask for
Yeah.
requests, and they'd interact with the audience all the time. It was like being part of a private party every time they
Yeah.
played.
I heard that it was always a party atmosphere
Yes.
and that everyone knew each other. But it was also described to me as like a can of sardines.
Yes,
Everybody, and you're going to see some pictures tonight that will verify that.
that's right.
The other thing is the Cavern Club gave birth to a revolution.
Yes.
You're going to see photos of that revolution tonight. The revolution was that Liverpool was now on the map.
Yes.
It was no longer just a shipping community, a seaport community. And by the way, yes, White Star Line was in Liverpool.
That's right.
From is it the Titanic? People don't understand it. Yeah, the Titanic was built in Liverpool, so it's a very industrious community now. It's a very, very savvy business community, making a ton of money off the Beatles merchandise and memorabilia and clothing, and the Beatles Museum. By the way, lest we forget, the Beatles Museum is housed in Liverpool.
Yes.
And Debbie has a hand in that as well. Debbie, let's take a look. We're going to do show and tell tonight. I love showing pictures of people. Let's take a look at this. And we'll tell everybody what we're seeing here. This, of course, is Debbie Greenberg. That's the book. That book. This book. It's a great book. And go out and buy it. It's available everywhere. You can buy this book. It's a fascinating book. It's the inside story. Now, what are we looking at here, Debbie?
You're looking at the entrance to the original Cavern Club. It was less than 4 feet wide, and it had 18 stone steps that went down to the bottom. You went down 14 steps. Then there was a little landing at facing you, and you turned left down another 4 steps, and then you entered the cavern proper. And that's when the heat and the noise would hit you. It was like stepping into an oven, but that was the only entrance in and out of the cavern.
That's what they tell me. They tell me that those stairs that went down were quite steep, almost a perfect, like straight down.
Yes, there was a handrail on the left-hand side to hold on to.
Oh, yes, you can see it in that photo. Look at it's funny that you say that because I just noticed it.
But the groups had to take their equipment past us if we were queuing up, though. You had to pin yourself against the wall to let them through with all their equipment.
Oh, they had that was when you say that's the only entrance, you mean like it's the only entrance?
Yes.
Oh, I thought you meant was the only public entrance. I thought maybe there was the musicians brought their equipment in some. Oh, wow, that's crazy. Remarkable. We're going to take another look here. These are, of course, the Beatles. This is, I want to explain to what we're seeing here. We're looking at the Beatles on stage at the original Cavern Club. Now,
yes.
If you look at this, we're looking at a lot of archways, so what we call a proscenium arch. And so these arches are all throughout the cavern, correct?
Yes.
And they are essentially what's holding the place together.
That's right.
we're looking at about, it looks like about 10 or 12 girls shoved into that little corner. How loud was that music inside the cavern?
It was deafening, absolutely deafening. But we loved it. You know, we didn't care how loud it was.
Right.
Bob Woolley used to say even the spiders ran for cover when the groups were on stage.
The
That's
remarkable thing, Debbie, is it looks like that those young women, even though they're all crammed together, they don't seem to be bothered at all.
no, we couldn't get enough of it.
You're there. That's Debbie Greenberg, standing with a very familiar looking man who has a lot of success, a lot of money, and has written a lot of songs. That's Sir Paul McCartney.
That's
So,
right.
how the heck did you meet Paul McCartney?
Well, this photograph was taken by Linda Eastman.
Oh, Linda took the photo.
Linda took the photograph.
Oh, wow.
I'd been to the hairdressers and my dad had been stocking the top bar, which is the bar you can see behind the photo of Paul and I together.
Yes, ma'am.
And Paul walked in and said, my dad introduced himself, Alf Gagan, the Cavern, and Paul said, Paul McCartney, the Cavern. And he said, I've got my new girlfriend in the car, Alf, outside, but I'd like to bring her back in about an hour to show her where it all began. On one condition, that you don't bring the press in. He said, because I've got to go over the water to deliver a record player to my stepsister, Ruth, and I'd like to come back in about an hour. And my dad said, okay, you've got it. Now, I came back from the hairdressers, thought I'd missed him, and Dad said, don't worry, there's a chance he'll come back. You finish stocking the bar, put champagne on ice, I'm going to go and buy a camera. And he went a few blocks away, bought a Yashica camera, and brought the photographer back with him, didn't tell him what it was for. And the photographer set all the dials and the apertures ready on the camera for the lighting in the cavern. And then sure enough, Paul came back with Linda. And we shut the door to stop the tourists coming in. And we chatted. Paul wanted to reminisce about the very early days in the cavern, of how it all started and how it felt. And Dad went to pour champagne, and Linda said, I'll do that. I'm a good bartender. So she poured the champagne, and we talked some more. And Dad said, could we have some personal photographs, Paul? And he said, sure. Dad went to pick the camera up because the photographer had said, just you don't have to do anything, just press the button. Linda goes for the camera. I'm a good photographer. I'll do that. So she picked the camera up. And I could see my dad's face was a study. I could see he was thinking, well, that's torn it, because we didn't have a clue who she was or what she did.
Yeah, she was a photographer.
Yes, quite, but we didn't know.
Quite a good one, in fact.
I know, absolutely. And so Linda took more photographs, and we chatted in the top bar. And then we went down. When we bought the Cavern, we had to adhere to a lot of demands by Liverpool Corporation. And because of that entrance that you saw there, we had to put a brand new entrance into the Cavern, which we did at number 8 Matthew Street. We got the deeds for 8, 10, and 12 Matthew Street. So we put the entrance at number 8. And so you went through number 8 and down a big 8-foot staircase down into the cavern proper. And then we went down into the cavern proper. And then Paul went over to the upright piano outside the band room, and he started to sing and play Hey Jude. And that was so surreal. It was as if it was taking place in slow motion. And you know, we were just all in the moment together with him.
Isn't that remarkable?
It was such
a
magical day.
Look at this photo. Look how young Nigel was in this photo.
I know.
Wow. There's Nigel giving Linda a big hug. There's Paul.
Yes.
There's Debbie. This looks like, because I have other photographs that are part of this set.
Yes.
And it looks like somebody's wedding.
It was Mike McCartney's wedding. It was Paul's
brother.
Nigel and I filmed the wedding for them. Nigel had been down to London on the train, and he was coming back, and he bumped into Mike McCartney. And Mike said, "Oh, all right, Nigel, I'm glad I've seen you, because I'm getting married in a few weeks, and you don't know anybody that'll video the wedding for us, do you?" And Nigel said, "Well, I've got a small production company. I'll do it, but I'll have to bring somebody with me." The
Right.
equipment was heavy, in those days.
Sure.
And so well, he said, "As long as you can trust them, okay." So, of course, I was key grip. I had the recorder and Nigel had the camera.
Yeah.
And we videoed the wedding at St. Barnabas's Church in Penny Lane, where Paul was a choir boy.
Yeah.
And we could only video outside the church when they came out. And then we went back to the reception, and we continued to film for them right through to the evening. It was magic.
I noticed that both you and Nigel, and I took that photo and I blew it up. I had to read what was on your name tag. And you and Nigel are both wearing name tags. Is that so
That's
people
right.
knew that you were someone's guest there, right?
Yes. Well, it said Liverpool Video Services, which was
Oh,
nice.
gotcha. Okay. So let's take a look at the next series of photos here. And this one, of course, this is Paul and Linda. That's Mike. That's Mike McCartney, Paul's brother,
Yes,
and his bride.
Rowena.
And you are you off to the side of this photo, or are you the one taking the photo?
No, I'm not taking the photo. This lady on the left in the blue is Auntie Jin, and this lady on the right is Rowena's mother. Um,
Oh, I gotcha. Okay.
but it was actually a friend of ours, from the Remo 4. It was Don Andrew that took the photographs.
Oh,
And
okay.
he
Gotcha.
gave them to us, and, when I wrote my book, I asked him, "Would it be all right for me to use the photographs?" And he said, "Absolutely." He said, "They're your photographs. I gave them to you." He said, "So
So
you can
now
use
that
them."
Mike said that, or Paul?
No, 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 that was Don
Oh, I
Andrew
gotcha. Got you covered. Okay.
from the Remo 4. He took the photo. He was
Oh,
the
yeah, the
photographer.
photos. Yes.
Yeah,
Oh, so he let you have them.
he let
Terrific.
me have them.
Oh,
Yes.
wonderful. That's beautiful. There's a couple more photos here in this. There's Nigel and Debbie with Gilbert O'Sullivan. Now,
That was at
Gilbert,
the
I'm
sorry,
sorry.
that was the 50th anniversary of the Cavern.
Oh, that was the special occasion that marked the 50th anniversary. Okay.
Yes.
Fabulous. And by the way, Gilbert always had that hair. He always had that. He was always had this big bush of hair on his head.
Yes.
Um, Great entertainer too. A very good singer. I always
Yes.
liked listening to his music. What his hit song was called "Alone Again Naturally." Was that the
Yes.
one?
Yes.
Yeah, I love that song. You don't hear music like that anymore that you can understand.
I know.
Here are the liner notes for the Cavern Club, the inside story. This was the book of the month for the Book of the Month Club, and it tells the inside story of the Cavern Club by Debbie Greenberg, my special guest. Um, you got a lot of press from this book. How much of it, Debbie, was negative? Did you get any haters?
No, I'm pleased to say no, I didn't.
You are so fortunate. You really, really are. Now, we are looking at a very, very early photograph, and I want people to understand that what we're seeing here is the cavern, which basically looks like a shoebox with like thousands of people in it. There's probably only about 100, but it looks like thousands because they're all crammed together. The
Well,
Beatles are up on stage, which looks like a very small stage.
yes. It
Very
was
small.
small. It was
Yeah.
almost the size of the one in the replica cavern, but the ceiling height in the original cavern is about 2 or 3 feet higher than the one in the replica cavern. But
Yeah.
the capacity for the cavern, the original cavern, was 600.
Was it really
Mhm.
that many?
Yes, and they'd
I'm
squeeze a few
shocked.
more in. Yeah.
I'm absolutely shocked that it was that many. We're looking at this photo, Debbie. If you're looking straight on, if I'm looking to the left and to the right, we see those arches.
Yes.
Did they go anywhere, or was that just the wall there?
No, when you entered the cavern,
Yeah.
there were three tunnels. The one on the left had the cloakroom at the far end where Cilla Black worked.
Oh, Scylla was at the cloakroom.
She was in the she was the
She
cloakroom girl.
worked in the Cilla Black with that great voice worked in the
Yes,
cloakroom.
but the
They
Beatles
hid her in a closet.
but the Beatles used to bring her up on stage. Paul used to say, he used to call her Cyril, and he'd say, "Come on, Cyril, give us a song." And Cilla would get up on stage with the Beatles. They'd back her, and she'd sing "Fever" or "Summertime." That was her type of
Wow.
music. And
Amazing.
the foremost used to back her as well. But the tunnels in the caverns consisted of three tunnels. So there was the tunnel on the left with the cloakroom at the far end.
Yeah.
There was the central tunnel, and at the other end of the left-hand tunnel was the snack bar that sold
Right.
soup and Coca-Cola and hot dogs and tea and
Yeah.
coffee. And the
Now, Debbie, what we're looking at, right? See those gentlemen, those young boys there on the right?
Yes.
They seem to be in front of a tunnel. Where did that tunnel go to?
Well, the people that you're looking at on the right
Yeah.
were where if you were to go through those arches where they're standing, you'd
Yeah.
be in another tunnel then. That was the left-hand tunnel. And then
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
and then this central tunnel where the stage is, and then the same thing happened. The same thing was replicated on the left-hand side, parallel, another tunnel, and the band room was at the far end of that one.
Yeah.
And they'd go through
Wow.
the band room to get on the stage.
What we're looking at now, they tell me that this is the new cavern.
Yes.
Okay. And I also found out that there was some concern about trying to replicate the glory of the original cavern. Some people were concerned that they didn't want to have another cavern club there. Why ultimately, why was it built, and who was the driving force behind the new cavern?
Well, it was quite a number of years after the original cavern was demolished, and plans were put before the council to build a new cavern club, and it was accepted. It was pushed through the council, and it was replicated. They managed to save a good percentage, probably about 80 or 90% of the original bricks from the original cavern,
Yeah.
and they rebuilt the arches inside. It's a very, very good replica. The only thing, as I mentioned, that I can find different in is the height of the head height on the stage.
Yeah, you're actually going to see that here in just a second. We're going to take a look again. That was the original place. Again, some more photos from inside. Here we go. This is again back to the original.
Yes.
I wanted to bring this photo up for a very specific reason. I want everyone to notice the back wall of the cavern. That's a unique design there.
That
If
was a Mondrian design.
Oh, okay. It's interesting because if you look, and when I looked at it at first, you're going to laugh at me when I tell you this, but it almost looked like a map of the United States.
Okay.
It did it because it's just kind of like all the different shapes, and it reminded me
Yes,
of a
I
U.S.
see what
map.
you mean, yes.
Yeah, and so let's take a look at some of the. Here we go. This is a mob of teenagers inside. Now, these are very small archways.
Yes.
And they're screaming. Obviously, the Beatles are on stage. I can only guess the Beatles are on stage because these girls are all screaming. It's either that or Elvis, and I don't think Elvis ever played the cat.
No, he didn't.
okay, again, this is a photo, Debbie, from outside. The original Cavern Club outside.
Yes.
Now, the door, they tell me, was on the corner, right? No?
No.
Oh,
No.
was
It
this
was
the
It was on
okay.
the flat of the wall. It was a completely flat wall, and it was just part of the flat wall.
So that's what we're seeing there then.
Yes.
That's the original. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, because I was concerned. I was a little confused because I did see um where it looked like the entrance was on a corner of a building somewhere. And maybe that was the new one. I don't know. We'll take a look in a
Yes. Well,
minute.
that looks as if it's on a corner, the new one. That's
Oh, okay.
perfect,
And so this is the original entrance here.
yes.
Yeah, when I first looked at that. And now, let me just make sure is this what we're looking at? Is this the original cavern or is this the replica?
That looks like the replica.
Okay. Um, it appears that if if you're just seeing this for the first time, it looks like a map of the US. Uh, because there's all kinds of wonderful colors in it and it looks like a
Yes.
rainbow. Except for the giant sign in the middle that says the Beatles and the swinging blue jeans. Um, it's interesting that everybody's on that wall. Now, I'm going to go back. This is going to be memory lane a little bit here. Some of these photos might make Debbie sad, but I think we'll get some explanation as to what we're looking at here. Okay, now they tell me, Debbie, that this was the site of the original Cavern Club where this empty space is here.
Yes, well, that was the site of the warehouses above the original cavern. Of course, that the cavern was in the cellar below.
Okay. And that's called Matthew Street.
That's right.
Okay. Everyone I spoke to said you didn't need an address for the cavern. Everybody said just go to Matthew Street, you'll find it.
Yes.
Yeah. So and it's an interesting photo that we're looking at because you're going to see why it's interesting here in just a minute. That's where the cavern was. This is underneath.
That's the replica cavern.
Oh, this is the replica. Oh, it is it? Okay. Now it was black and white. Oh, okay. I'm looking at this thinking this is the original, and I'll tell you what made me think it was the original. I see that rope line in the front. I thought that was like a stay away thing.
No, it never had a rope. The only time we put a barrier across the stage in the original cavern was when Chuck Berry came to play, because he insisted on having a barrier because of the close proximity to the audience.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So that's the replica we're looking at. All right. Now I get some perspective. Again, this is the first time I'm seeing these photos with you. So I'm not quite sure because of it's black and white. It does have a kind of vintage look to it. Okay, now this is actually you're looking at what would have been the Cavern Club. This is underneath the street.
Yes.
And you can see where the warehouse that you spoke of would have taken up this property.
Yes.
And people are looking at these unmistakable arches.
Yes.
One of those archways could very well have been the stage. We don't know. All
No.
we know is that we're looking at this photo, Debbie, and we can see that on the street above there are work trucks, large trucks moving. I'm assuming they're moving debris back and forth.
But the arches that you're looking at would have been on the side of the cavern, so that the stage arch would have been beyond the crane over to the right at the back.
Oh, I see. So behind where that crane is.
Yes, that would have been where the position of the stage would have been.
Got it. Okay, so let's take a look here. Now, this is an interesting picture. Again, as you said, they used a lot of the bricks from the original cavern. You're
Yes.
looking at where they got a lot of them. Those little archways that you're looking at there, that's all been filled in.
Yes.
That's the original Cavern Club that's been filled in with dirt.
Yes.
And all you can see now, all remaining of that beautiful piece of history, is the top of a proscenium arch. And so let's look at the next series of photos. And that's again, yeah, there it is, the cavern entrance right up against the wall there.
And that's Badfinger.
Was this taken, I'm guessing, about mid-60s, maybe 67 or so?
Outside the cavern. This was the Ivies who became Badfinger.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes. The
Yes,
Ivies played between 68, 69.
okay.
And Badfinger played 1970.
Yeah, I thought that it looked about mid-60s. And here's Paul. This is a band called Curiosity Shop. Now, let me tell everybody what was happening here, because I have a little background on this. Let me just read this to everybody. So, the band called Curiosity Shop, they were performing at the Cavern in the evening, but this happened to be in the afternoon when the band was rehearsing.
That's right.
Well, Paul hears this music coming from the Cavern Club.
Now, this was the day that he walked in with Linda. And this was the day that he just played Hey Jude on the piano to us. And then he got through the band room and went on the stage with they'd been rehearsing the Curiosity Shop. My father managed this group.
Okay. Yeah, what it's telling me here is Paul McCartney makes an unannounced visit to the Cavern. Curiosity Shop was rehearsing and Paul joins in.
That's right. He took his place on the drums and he said he'd always been a frustrated drummer.
Yeah,
And
Paul was
Linda
always wanting to play drums for some strange reason.
Well, Linda took this photograph as well.
And so let's talk about this for a second. Paul is, of course, known as probably the world's most famous bass player.
Yes.
But that easily could have gone to Stuart Sutcliffe because he was the original bass player of the Beatles. What was Paul's position in the band if Stuart was the bassist?
Well, I think he was rhythm to begin with.
A left-handed guitar, okay.
Because when he took over, what happened when they came back from Hamburg in the December 1970? Gosh, get my dates right. 1960. On the 27th of December, they played Liverpool Town Hall. Now, Chas Newby had to step in for them. Coincidentally, he was a left-handed bass player as well, and he shared the same birthday as Paul McCartney. And
wow.
he stepped in for 4 gigs in the December, and then 1961. He'd gone. He'd only done the 4 gigs, and Paul McCartney stepped in until Stu came back on the 21st of February, and that's how Paul came to develop the bass.
Remarkable. This is the crowd gathering again. This looks like early to mid 60s. This is the Cavern. Now, would you and your father have owned the Cavern at this point in time?
No.
Okay.
That was before we bought it.
Okay. So this was somewhere between 64 and 66, perhaps?
Yes, I would say so.
And was it normal for young people to gather outside like this?
Yes.
Okay. And so this is before. Okay, this is the new one, Cavern, I am assuming.
Yes.
Okay, and I'm looking at what looks like to be the bar.
Yes, you're looking at the bar from the far end, from the stage end.
Mm-hmm. So if I'm on the stage, I'm looking at the bar straight ahead.
No, not quite, because the bar continues this way. So the stage would be in the next aisle here.
Oh, I
To
got
the
you.
right.
Okay. And again, this is remarkable that they've done an amazing job of replicating the cavern, which begs the question to me, and call me nuts, but if they were going to rebuild it anyway, why did they take it down to begin with?
Oh, well, that's the $1,000,000 question. That's why I wrote the book, because the truth was that we'd sold the club in 1970. We were in the process of selling the club um, to a guy called Harry Waterman, who'd brought in a partner called Roy Adams. And uh, negotiations started in November 1970, and the contracts were drawn up. And then my dad got a letter from solicitors in London who were acting on behalf of British Rail. Now, British Rail owned the land that the cavern stood on, and they wanted to build a new metro underground railway link under Liverpool city centre. And they wanted the site of the cavern for a proposed ventilation shaft. And they were putting a bill before Parliament in 71 in the January, and if it was passed, it would give them the power to compulsorily purchase the site of the cavern. And my dad contacted the solicitor and said, you must make the buyers aware of this. He also rang Harry Waterman and told him about it. And then the negotiations continued, and the contracts were signed and exchanged towards the end of November. And then another letter arrived from the solicitors in London saying that if the owners of the cavern were prepared to pay the sum of £500, British Rail would be prepared to move the proposed site of the shaft further down Matthew Street, nearer to Button Street. And my father gave the letter to the solicitor. He rang Harry 3 times while I was there. Now, Harry was a multimillionaire even in those days. He owned 12 clubs in Liverpool. And my dad was really urgent with him. Harry, you've got to pay this money. You mustn't lose the cavern. It's not just another club. It's a music mecca. It belongs to the world. All right, Alfie. He was very apathetic. And 3 times my dad rang with more urgency. And he said, look, Harry, it's a shrine to the world. You mustn't lose it. Oh, well, all right, Alfie, he said, I'll let Roy decide. And he put the onus on Roy Adams, who was his partner for purchasing the cavern. And they had 2.5 years to pay that money to British Rail. And they could have saved the cavern, and they didn't. They chose not to do it. And it was a sliding doors moment. It was a matter of weeks, that's all. Had we still have owned the cavern when that second letter arrived, the original cavern would still be there today, because we wouldn't have hesitated to pay that money.
Oh, £500 seems like a measly amount of money.
Exactly. Well, it was to him because he was a multimillionaire.
That's crazy.
I know.
So now this is the new cavern, Debbie. And so where are we looking at Matthew Street here still?
Yes. You're looking at number 8 Matthew Street. That's where it was. That's where we'd put the entrance in. But because the Matthew Street is on an incline, and because number 8 is higher up the street, nearer to the Hard Days Night Hotel, you have to go much further.
Say that again, the Hard Days Night Hotel?
Hard Days Night Hotel.
I love it. Only in Liverpool can they find the Hard Days. That's like in Memphis, Tennessee. It's the only place in the world you're going to find the Heartbreak Hotel.
That's
in
right.
Memphis. The Hard Days Night Hotel in Liverpool. I love it, on Matthew Street.
And so you have to go down about 30 feet down into the new cavern.
Yeah.
When you went down those stone steps into the original cavern, it was only about 11 to 12 feet below ground. So there was a big difference because of the incline of the street.
Yeah. And then the other one, you had to go down 18 steps almost straight down.
Yes.
And so it's a big difference in the way you entered the club. But I'll tell you what, from what I saw of the original club in photographs, because I was just a baby at the time. I don't even remember. This looks like they did a very, very respectable job of duplicating it.
Oh, absolutely.
Amazing.
Thank goodness we've got it. We could have ended up with nothing. So hats off, and hats off to Bill Heckle and Dave Jones, who have it now and have had it for decades. They've done a wonderful job for Liverpool and the city.
Now, Debbie, has Ringo or Paul or any of the Beatles commented on what this club means to them? Have they been there? Have you know if Ringo or Paul have been there? I don't know if this was built when John or George were still with us.
It was built in 1984, but Paul has been back and played here at the new Cavern.
Oh, he has?
He has.
Oh, wow. Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, I love to find that video. Wow, man. Interesting stuff. Let's take a look at this. Here we go. Sir Paul Gets Back, it says. Sir Paul Gets Back. This is, again, we've seen the original photo of this. This is Paul joining in with Curiosity Shop, a band that Debbie managed. Debbie's father managed.
That was the original Cavern, the shop before that one.
Yeah. Oh, was it? Okay, so let's take a look there. Let's take a look. This is the original, correct?
One before. Go one before.
One before. I got it right here. Here we go. Let's see. Here we go.
That's the original.
That's the original Cavern Club. Wow. That's remarkable. You know what? Just looking at that picture, it's just the eeriness of this empty, historic building, and you can see just how low the ceilings are.
Yes.
That you were referring to earlier. It's not a very high archway, and maybe.
No, but it is 2 feet higher than the replica.
Is it really?
Mm-hmm.
So we're looking at the archways might have been 8 feet, maybe.
Yes, I've got the actual dimensions. I can send them on to you.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I would love to talk to somebody that was, man, that's crazy.
The whole cavern was approximately 55, 60 feet across and about 30, 40 feet depth. That's all. It wasn't.
And that was it. And they held 600 people there.
Yes.
That is absolutely astounding to me. That is remarkable. And this, of course, is the new cavern.
Mm-hmm.
Again, now it's interesting here because the area seems to have changed, but the entrance is still right up against the wall.
Yes, well, they've built it flat. You as you go in there, it just looks as if it's on the corner here on the right, but it isn't. It's all on the flat.
Yeah, and that's what threw me off. It looked like, well, you know what threw me was, I'm in the other photographs, I didn't see this building to the right that seems to be connected to the rest of these buildings.
Yes.
And it looked like it was just a street there at one point.
I know.
Yeah. So this was a long time ago, too. We're talking about the original cavern.
But
again, like the phoenix from the ashes, this is
that was the new cavern, the one before.
Yeah, this one here, right?
That's the new cavern.
Yeah, that's the new one.
Yeah.
And then we're going to see one more like that, which is right here. This is the
that's the
new Cavern Club.
Yes.
This is the photograph, Debbie, that really kind of where I thought it was on the corner.
Yes, it looks like that.
Yeah, it sure does. It kind of threw me off a bit. But people can see that there are just throngs of people heading into this club. Now, Debbie, how many people does the new club hold?
Oh, gosh. Well, of course, they've added a live lounge, what they call the live lounge as well. So I should imagine it would be up to 1,000 or more.
Okay. And this is Again, the setup is almost identical as the original.
The three archways inside to replicate the original cavern, yes. And then they've got this new live lounge, which is a big room with a bar and a stage as well.
Oh, fabulous. So there's like a smaller stage and then a main stage.
Yes, you've got the main stage of the replica cavern to replicate the original, and then you go as you go in past the bar over to the right. Then you go through to the live lounge.
And I'm sure you've been there, of course, to the new cavern.
Yes.
I don't imagine what would keep you away from it. You kidding me? That's like your history here.
We're actually going tomorrow night.
Are you really?
Yes.
You got to do me a favor. First of all, there's so much history here. I can't do this in one episode. I have to have you back.
Okay.
To do a second episode with me. And you got to bring your amazing husband, Nigel, with you.
Okay.
That we're going to do. The other thing, that when we get off the air, don't go anywhere. I want to talk to you for a couple minutes.
Okay.
This is just, folks, that you ain't seen nothing yet. This is just the beginning. Debbie Greenberg she's a piece of music history. This woman is music history with legs. Okay. I mean, you don't even know how much history she's got. The book is called Cavern Club, The Inside Story. Get this book. If you can't find it, hit me up. I will get you a copy. I promise you. But you're not getting my signed copy. Forget it.
You can get it on Amazon or the BeatlesBookstore.com or Barnes & Noble.
Oh, yeah. Barnes & Noble, BeatlesBookstore.com. Debbie is prominently featured there. Debbie Greenberg is an amazing author and has, as she said, she has capsulized a labor of love in a book that you can get. And she'd be happy to sell to you. So happy she came to the States to sell it. And I missed out, damn it.
Oh.
Fabulous book. So, Debbie, what's next for you? How can people get a hold of you?
Well, they can reach me on Facebook or through thebeatlesbookstore.com.
Fantastic. Well, I'll tell you what. You are a welcome guest here, young lady. Anytime you wish, we have an opening for you. I will tell everyone next week, important programming notes. Next week, we are doing a special look at free speech in America. What's happening to our constitutional rights? Where are they going and who's taking them? We will be here with Pastor Steve Kwiatkowski, who will unleash the constitutionality of free speech next week on America's podcast. What's the Buzz? For Debbie Greenberg, for everybody associated with the Cavern Club, I'm Mad Dog DeCipio. We'll see you next time. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.